Sa bula Vinaka everybody. Nakalasema mai. Sa Vinaka Mrs. Marietta dengan moto Kia ora mai Nisilandi. Nakalasema mai. Bula fuata. Sa Vinaka Alfred Williame. Noa'ia mauri. Naka aloha mai Hawaii. Bula hadise Moresio Noa'ia. Sa Nakalasema mai. Bula Silvia Rupeni. Sa Vinaka vakalevu Sara nimbula Vinaka na wekanda ni siama tiko mai na vesai viti na vesai vura-vura ndo mbula Vinaka me Rotuma Noa'ia mauri ni takani ni mbula Vinaka tiko aloha mai Honolulu aloha mai Hilo kerova kumbula sarchuka ningo na viwakani me na yatu Hawaii ndo mbula Vinaka me Australia Kelly Bethel mbula Vinaka Leila kei molo me Lotoka Vinaka vakalevu Sara na siama tiko mai vikimni na wekanda o ni rongoda na kali malumu moni siama mai en ka Vinaka ni kua klani sika moni tiko mai viti ndua na kaloka na singa levu Hawaii singa tambu tiko tolu na kaloka na kavi Naka vakalevu Sara na siama tiko mai ke mami vamureti kungona Talanoa me Baleti Rotuma da tiko na Rotuma Language Week na tika vutiko na singa tambu na ikadhiwa ni singa ni bulome na Rotuma Day na ikatini katolu ni bulome. Yeah, so as a lead up to the Rotuma Day, as a lead up to the Rotuma Language Week, we have decided to invite various friends from Rotuma who are living in different parts of the world to come on board and Talanoa and share a little bit about themselves and their family and what they are doing at the moment. So we have been blessed with a few of our lineups that we've had last week. So bakambula sarchiko be Madam Maria Ringamoto, Vinaka vakalevu Sara Madam nanomuni ngole mai medami Talanoa. Also, we invited Professor Lady Fogard from the University of Auckland. He's an archaeologist who went over to Rotuma and conducted 2 excavations over there. So he was able to come on Wednesday to share his research. Utia sanga ngole mai o Fesaitu Solomon. Vinaka Fesaitu for coming on board to share about the work that she's doing in terms of the teaching of the Rotuman language, not only in New Zealand, but now all over the world. We've had students logging in from around the world via Zoom, learning this beautiful language, which is the Rotuman language. And then on Friday, we had George Faktaufon, who came over from Nandi, logging in from the beautiful jet set town of Nandi, and helping us appreciate life in Rotuma in the 1950s and 1960s. And then on Saturday, we invited Maluseo Monise, who was logging in from Kirikiriroa in Hamilton, New Zealand, and he's currently doing his master's degree at the University of Waikato. And it was such a joy to have him share his story with all of us and his vision and his dream dreams of living in Aotearoa, but also connecting back to Rotuma. There is a beautiful thing about what Maluseu shared with us on Saturday. And then yesterday we had Professor Paul Garrity from the University of the South Pacific, who was sharing with us the richness of the Rotuma language, because he is a linguist. So he was able to Talanoa with us and share the connection of the Rotuma language with the Fijian language, plus also with Samoa and Tonga, and even some connections here to Hawaii. And speaking of Hawaii, here we are on a beautiful Sunday afternoon, where the two of us here, myself connecting in from the University of Hawaii Hilo, logging in from the beautiful town of Hilo, and connecting to the beautiful city of Honolulu. So today, we have the pleasure of hosting one of Rotuma's renowned sons, Professor Vilsoni Hereniko. So at this point, I would like to welcome you, Vilsoni, to this Talanoa session. Nisambula Vinaka, Noa'ia e mauri.
Bula Vinaka Tarisi and Noa'ia e mauri to all the Rotumans listening in this afternoon. I must say that Dr. Tarisi has incredible skills in terms of being able to coerce people and to cajole them into doing her wishes. I should say that when she first sent me an email, I wish I hadn't seen it because I didn't think that I had anything really worthwhile to share. And later on, I realized that as a friend, Tarisi, I should do this for her. And so it is a pleasure for me to be sharing whatever I can with her, and also to all of you listening in today. So Noa'ia mauri to all the Rotumans and the Fijians and anybody else listening in today.
Yes, Vinaka vakalevu Sara, Professor Vili, for agreeing to my humble request, and it really means a lot to me. And I know with the people of Rotuma, I have a very soft spot for Rotuma. I was thinking before Talanoa, maybe I should have a DNA test, because my heart is very soft for Rotuma, so I might have a connection to Rotuma, Professor Vili.
No, I think you just want to eat biscuits. You want to go and see whether there's still biscuit plantations there. That's what you Fijians like to call us, right? You call us the biscuit planters. So we understand. You know, we're a little colonized by Fiji, but that's okay. One day we'll have our independence.
So yeah, I've just been so touched and moved, with thinking back to Aotearoa, where I had a lot of Rotumans that I was working with, and I realized that they're always in the shadow of Fiji, as you know. Whenever we do things in New Zealand, it's always Fiji all the time, and then the Rotumans and everyone else come underneath. And then when I was working at the Auckland Museum one day, Professor Vili, they called me to this special room at the Auckland Museum, and they told me, Teresi, that table over there, those are mats and fans and baskets from Fiji. And I walked over and I said to the curators, they're not from Fiji. And they were like, oh, but the label said Fiji. As soon as I saw them, I knew straight away that they are from Rotuma. And so I called up to them and I said, I have to let you know that even though it has Fiji on the label, they're actually from Rotuma. And then they wanted me to tell them a little bit about Rotuma, because I think some of them didn't even know that island called Rotuma was part of Fiji. So I gave them a little geography test and a lecture. And so after that, the door opened for the Rotuman community at the Auckland Museum, where we were able to bring in, Fesaitu Solomone and a few other elders in the community to come and talk about the artifacts there in the Auckland Museum. So from then on, I've kind of realized that, Rotuma needs their own space within the museums, and so that's kind of like how my vision and my journey on making sure that Rotuma should never ever be always in the shadow of Fiji. Rotuma needs its own spotlight. And so the idea to have this Rotuma week was born from that moment. And
So
so,
you're trying to make up for your sins, right? You're trying to redeem yourself. Okay. Did you tell
yes,
them about the Tarorum Bona that would arrive on the cargo boats and create this fragrant smell in Suva City?
very much so. But I understand it's very healthy. It's good for you.
Okay, good. Biscuits and Taroro, huh?
Absolutely. That's a good combination. Very good combination.
Okay, so what questions do you have for me?
Yes, Vinaka vakalevu sara. Iyo. So to kickstart our Talanoa today and to what I'm calling the Monday, because it's Monday in Fiji, I was calling it a motivational Monday. And it's Monday over there. And for you coming over to the platform, it's a wonderful opportunity for you to firstly just introduce yourself to us and maybe share some of your memories of growing up on Rotuma.
Okay, well, as you mentioned earlier, my name is Vilsoni Hereniko. Hereniko is the name of my father. He was married to Rewi Olivia, and we lived in Mea Village in Hapmak, which has Ahau on one side and Itutiu, and on the other side, Malhaha, where the high school is located. And I was born and raised on the island for the first 16 years of my life. I never left. Can you imagine that? I survived 16 years on Rotuma, never left. So when I think back to those 16 years, of course, I have the usual happy memories of going for picnics, around the island at Choro and Fuliu and so on. I remember the incredible sunsets, brilliant sunsets, but I also remember the hurricanes. I remember times that, weren't as idyllic as one would wish. I I'm the youngest of 11 kids. So when I was growing up, I never had any new things. Everything was handed down to me. I remember going to school wearing uniforms that were too big for me and being teased by the kids. I remember days when there was hardly any food, and I remember having to look for coconuts to eat in the bush, the hara, the thing inside the coconuts, the white thing, the placenta.
We call it vara. We call it vara in Fijian.
Yeah, right. So many a meal, was just eating that, because it was really hard to feed a lot of kids on Rotuma, no supermarkets and so on. Of course, a lot of the time I went fishing. I enjoyed fishing around the lagoon, with the women with the nets and just eating the raw fish, immediately once you catch them, and you always had your taro or your bananas or your cassava with you. So yeah, those were happy memories and memories that weren't so wonderful. Yeah.
Yes. Wow, 16 years. Eh? So you went to the primary school there? Tell us a little bit about the school.
Yeah, I think at that time it was called Malha Primary School, and then I went to Malhaha High School, which later on became Rotuma High School. Yeah, of course, we had to walk, to the school. I remember when it rained, we would rush into the bush to look for, umbrellas, kind of big leaves of the apea plant or the banana leaves, so we'd try and crack a bottle to use the glass to cut the leaves so we could have our own kind of leafy umbrellas, going to school. Um, but I guess for me, when I look back, it was interesting that from a very early age, I knew that the only way to have a better future for myself was through education.
Wow.
And so I became aware that there was one scholarship given by the Council of Chiefs
Mm.
at the end of the year to the student with the highest marks at Form 4
Yeah.
level. And so I knew that that was my passport out of Rotuma to Fiji, because at the time we thought of Fiji and Suva as, like the bright lights. Everybody wanted to go to Suva, and see the bright lights of Suva. And so I was determined to get that scholarship and get out of Rotuma because my folks were so poor. I knew there was no way they could afford to send me to school in Fiji.
Mm.
So looking back, I guess I made at least one right decision, one good decision, which is to get the best education possible
Yeah.
and get that scholarship and leave for Fiji for further education.
Wow. And I understand that you were a bookworm when you were little on Rotuma.
Yeah, I was so I was such an avid reader. I was really hungry for books, for story. Fortunately, my father was a storyteller. He loved to tell us the so-called myths and legends of the island. So if you were to see the film we made, Piarta Maun Maf, uh, The Land Has Eyes, the beginning opens with the father telling stories to the family, the children and the mother around the fire. Well, that was my tribute to my father, who was, in my opinion, a wonderful storyteller. At nighttime, sitting outside on a mat under full moon, we would listen to these stories. And the thing about those stories was they really fired up my imagination. And the books, the Bible, I read the Bible, from cover to cover, Old Testament, New Testament in English and also in Rotuma. At the time, I read every single book on the island, some books twice. There weren't many, and I would have to hide to read, because if I was seen by the kids reading, they would mock me and say I was trying to be a white person, So sometimes I hid inside a kerosene drum, an empty drum, big drum, with my book. Sometimes I would climb an orange tree and I would lay back on the kind of the branch of orange tree and eat some oranges and read, And then later on, I got a subscription to Reader's Digest, and then I got an old a book of Greek mythology sent to me as a present from Fiji. These things are in my film, The Land Has Eyes. But those stories really sustained me for those 16 years, because through my imagination, I could travel way beyond the confines of the physicality and the smallness of the island. So I owe a lot to my father, particularly. My mother was very busy taking care of the children, as you can imagine, and fishing and weaving. My father was a very hard worker. He had green fingers, so to speak, and yams and taro. He was very good at that. But um, I knew that I really didn't want to spend the rest of my life on the island. Um, I remember cutting copra with my father one day, because that was the only means of income at the time. And my father saying to me that I must work hard in school, so that one day it will be my pen that brings the food to the table and not the machete. And that scene is in Piarta Maun Maf.
In the
And
film.
yeah, and that really inspired me. The other proverb that my father, and I think the Rotuman people loved to say when I was growing up is "Hio right, I'm Hio lafa," which is translated as, you must complete what you set out to do. And that was such a powerful saying for the Rotuman people that through hard times, I hung on to that proverb, hio right, I'm a hiolafa. And I think a lot of Rotumans, older Rotumans, about my age, that's a very, very meaningful proverb. And of course, the saying, Piartamon maf, Piartamon al, Minachaman is nocho, the land has eyes, the land has teeth, and always knows the truth, which inspired the film. At the time, particularly, was very potent, very powerful. So if someone invoked that, you know that sooner or later, the spirit world would deliver justice. So everyone lived in fear of someone saying, the land has eyes and the land's going to get you. That's the worst thing that would happen to you. Which, interestingly enough, in The Land Has Eyes, there's the scene of the father being hauled before the court for stealing coconuts, which actually is from an actual incident that happened to my own father, who was falsely accused of stealing coconuts. I mean, who would have thought that stealing coconuts is a crime, right? And in Hawaii, because the coconut trees have no coconuts, there's no coconuts to steal, right? Anyway, so that inspired that scene in The Land Has Eyes, and my family was humiliated for a long time, but it was through a kind of a mistranslation, a deliberate mistranslation, which is in the movie as well. Anyway, you can tell that my relationship with the coconut tree goes a long way back.
Absolutely, because I was going to ask you the next question from the coconut trees in Rotuma. I
Right.
know you're doing some amazing work with coconut trees in Hawaii. Can you share to us a little bit of what you're doing with coconut trees here, via Kereker?
Well, I would like to say that you have chosen a background which is very upsetting to me. There is a coconut tree that there's no coconuts on them. Right? So, coming to Hawaii for the first time and seeing all the coconut trees with no coconuts on them, I actually wept, I cried, because I'd never seen anything like it. I felt that someone had massacred the place and just removed all the coconuts, from the coconut trees.
Yeah.
And I've actually just finished making a short film about the coconut trees of Hawaii, because I feel that it's a wonderful food and water source. And the people in Rotuma, when I was growing up, at least, coconut tree was the tree of life. And so to come to Hawaii and then to just see it as a symbol of paradise, a backdrop for the tourists, a wonderful image like you have in your background, right? Just a tree dancing in the wind, a bit like the hula girl dancing in the wind, but for me, it's more than a coconut tree. It's a tree that can sustain one's life. So I'm part of a growing movement in Hawaii. We call it New Now. It's interesting that the Hawaiians call the coconut tree and the coconut new, and Rotumans have the same word, right? So the movement is called New Now, and our mission is to reclaim the coconut tree as a food and a water source. So last Friday, for example, 2 days ago, I spent a whole day with the New Now movement in the middle of Waikiki at the back of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, where there used to be a huge coconut grove of about 1,000 coconut trees before tourism, called Helu Moa. Helu Moa, the scratching chicken. And it was, I was with someone who was making apu, or coconut shell from which you drink the ava, right? And teaching people how to make their own coconut, cups for drinking yangona. Someone was demonstrating how he uses, how he carves drums, pahu drums, from the coconut tree, especially the base of the tree. And I was weaving and showing tourists and locals how to make their own little calabash bowl. And it was so exciting to actually see these people do this and have a souvenir they could take home.
Yeah.
And funny thing was when I was there 7:30 to 3:30. I kind of wove nonstop, teaching the tourists and the locals how to weave. But a woman tourist came along and she asked me where the leaves were from, and I said, "Oh, look at all those trees there, from the coconut tree." And she looked up and she said, "Oh yes, the coconut tree." And then after a while she said, "But where are all the coconuts? I've never seen coconuts here." And I laughed and I said, "Oh, that's a long story. Too long for me to explain to you why, the coconut trees of Honolulu have no coconuts on them. But it's really because people here are afraid of the coconuts falling on their heads, which is interesting because in Rotuma, nobody talks about a coconut falling on their head. No one is worried. And in Fiji, right, we kind of learn to live around the coconut tree. But over here, people are terrified of lawsuits and being hauled before the court, because a coconut fell on their head. Anyway, so you see, I can go on for hours talking about Niu, the coconut tree.
But I'm just so touched and moved by, looking at one of the baskets that you have woven. It ended up in, was it the Honolulu Art Museum?
It was an art exhibition. Yeah, during the pandemic, what happened was, see, my father taught me how to weave atarau, we call it, for putting yam and taro and foods that you have cooked in the earthen oven, right? So this was something that the Rotuman men did, especially when they've kind of made the earthen oven and the food is cooking. And there's a period there which could take 2 to 3 hours. Then the men would climb the trees and then cut down the leaves and then start weaving these baskets to put the taro and the foods inside. And sometimes these would be taken for ceremonial presentations. Anyway, so I learned to do that when I was about 10. And then I went and got a Western education and forgot all about it. And then when the pandemic happened, I had a lot more time and I needed something to kind of get my mind outside, all the fear and the concerns about getting infected. And I started to think about the coconut tree, because when I go to swim in the ocean, the coconut tree is everywhere, and sometimes the leaves would be kind of hanging down. And then one day I was walking to swim and I felt like the coconut tree was calling me, So this is the poem when I felt that the coconut tree was calling me. Yeah. And it was a brown drooping leaf from the tree. Yeah. And so I said to myself, okay, I don't have a green leaf, but I have a brown leaf. I've never woven from a brown leaf before, but let me take it and see if I can weave a hat from it. And actually wove a beautiful hat, nice brown color from the dried leaf. And then this poem came to me, right? And it goes like this. When I'm old and drooping, don't walk by without saying hello to me. You drank from me. You ate my flesh too. My leaves gave you shelter. Remember? So take a part of me and make me a part of you. So feel me. Caress me like you've never done before. Be gentle with me. Be patient too. And together, you and I will give birth to new creations. The poem just came like that.
Wow, that was beautiful.
Yeah. And since then, I've had this wonderful, incredible relationship with Niu, So I go to the farmer's market and then I buy coconut water. I take my big bottle, and during the week I drink from it. I put it in the fridge, and I, love to eat the flesh of the coconuts, because the Polynesian men around here, they harvest the new when it's relatively young, too early actually, to cut down, but you can still drink the water. And so, I go to the farmer's market and I get my regular supply of new. And that keeps me kind of connected to Rotuma. And then, of course, now that I'm weaving, and I'm actually teaching people how to weave from the baskets, and I'm selling my baskets, and making a bit of money on the side, because I don't have much money, right? So it's, I mean, one of those baskets, I could sell for $100. I sold one to a woman in Maui who saw it on Facebook and ordered one for $125 a basket. And the wonderful thing is that it's free, right? I mean, the raw materials don't cost anything.
That's right. They're just there.
Oh, yeah. But usually, when there's a strong wind, then the leaves kind of are drooping. And then I always carry a ladder and a machete in my car. So I just stop by the roadside. I take a picture of the drooping leaves. And I say to myself, if the police arrest me, I say, look at this picture. The leaf was already broken, right?
I'm just fixing it.
I'm just helping the tree. I'm pruning the tree. And actually, you won't believe it, but because we had the recent event in Waikiki, my car is full of coconut leaves, as well as a new plant, which a seedling, which I got for a friend, a Rotuman friend who wants to plant the dwarf kind of coconut, and and all the leaves that are in my car. I think if my car had an accident, they would be shocked to see all these things that are inside my car. Anyway, so you can see that even in the city, you can remain connected to Rotuma. Yeah.
That is beautiful, and I just love the fact that, you mentioned you learned how to weave when you were 10, and then fast forward to 2020 with this pandemic, that the movement of your hand and the memories and the things that were taught to you all came back. And I'm sure those of you who are listening in will see some of the work that Professor Vilsoni have been weaving and sharing online. It's just so beautiful. And to me, the image that never kind of go away from my mind was looking at inside this art museum, where all this expensive, maybe I could say high art, as they would say it, there was this beautiful, humble looking Rotuman basket sitting there in the middle of it all. That was very, very moving for me. And that's one of the lessons I learned from that, is that, you can achieve anything. You don't have to, sort of adhere to the rules that other people give. For example, art museums will say, you need to have paintings, or you need to have this and that. But for you, Professor Vilsoni, you cut out all those rules, and that beautiful basket is right there in the middle of this gallery.
I know.
Can you just tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of almost like a very subversive act, But, I really give credit to my wife, who loved the baskets that I weave, and she's my biggest fan. Every time I weave a basket, she says, "Oh, that's your best one yet." And I said, every time I bring it, I have to keep weaving, right? Because the latest one is the best one. So in our home here in the middle of the city, we have about 20 coconut baskets and bowls and calabashes and stuff, and we use it for all kinds of things, to put newspapers in. We even have our toilet paper is in a coconut basket, and all kinds of stuff. It's actually quite beautiful when the leaves dry out nicely. And what I do is I bathe them and clean them in the Pacific Ocean, right? So it's got the manna of salt and ocean water. And so actually when I take the leaves to bathe in the ocean, I feel like the leaves come to life, like they're so happy to reconnect with the ocean. You know, so I imagine like the new floating all the way from Rotuma to Hawaii, or Samoa, you know, to Eastern Polynesia, and finally to Hawaii. So I think this connection uh, via the coconut tree, and it's fascinating that it's the same word new, right, that the Hawaiians have. And I think it's wonderful to be living in a very modern world and to remain connected to our homelands in very simple ways. It doesn't cost money. You know, when my friends have birthdays, I just leave them a coconut basket, and they're so happy, you know, because they can't go and buy it, you know. And yeah, on Friday, I took some baskets to 5 of them to kind of display and show. And I had woven one 2 days prior. And someone came along and looked around and said, "Oh, are these for sale?" I said, "Well, I didn't intend to sell them, but why? Do you want to buy a basket?" She said, "Yes, can I buy this one?" And I said, "Sure, okay." And you know, and she said, "How much?" I said, "Oh, just give me whatever you want to give me." And she said, "Oh, I have 50, but you know, I can go and get $10 more, 60. I'm sorry, I know it's worth more, but $60, is that okay?" I said, "Oh, that's plenty. Just give me 50." And so the $50, I use that to take my wife to the restaurant, so she doesn't have to cook that evening. And that's what they use the money for, you know, get some money from my baskets and take my wife to a restaurant so she doesn't have to cook.
Oh, yes, that is so beautiful, and I know Jeanette is watching, and just want to acknowledge this time to acknowledge you know, Jeanette, for being this very supportive woman behind this Rotuman gentleman, and I know you've achieved so much, you know, in life, and to have someone who is so supportive of you and even supporting your weaving skills. I just love that. I just love that. And I know your address, your house, so you'll expect me to turn up in your house.
Well, yeah, well, you know what's the saying? Behind every successful man is a woman pulling him by the hair. That's why I've lost so much hair already.
Yes, no, Vinaka, vakalevu, really for, you know, just for your sharing and just reminding us to appreciate simple things. I just love that. I love the fact that, you know, we're talking about this tree of life, the tree that you first saw when you were born, and the trees that you see when you go to school, and throughout your life in Rotuma. And now you come back to where you went to Fiji, and then now over to Hawaii. Yeah, it's just so beautiful, and thank you for sharing that with all of us. There's a lot of our friends who are making such beautiful comments. We will get back to that, of the comments that they're asking and commenting, that I would like to share with you after. But I just wanted to divert back to Fiji, because I know that you went to Queen Victoria School and you spent some time at the University of the South Pacific. What were some memories and highlights from being at these two institutions? Maybe we'll start with QVS. As a student, and I know you went back as a teacher. There's some students saying hello to you already online, and I understand that you went to USP. Anything you would like to share with us, some memories of USP and QVS?
Yeah, so I went to Queen Victoria School when I was 16, 1970, when I left Rotuma for Fiji. You know, Fiji became independent in 1970. And I spent 2 years there. Those of you who know QVS, I was in Tovata House, Tovata. My 2 years there were very difficult years for me because, you see, I had grown up in Rotuma 16 years, very closely knit family. I always had relatives and the support of the community. And then when I went to QVS, you know, I didn't have anyone coming to visit me, you know, during Parents' Day. Right. And so I kind of felt quite lost there for a while. But fortunately, I think my time in Rotuma had given me some inner strength and not to fear that I would fail, but also I was a Christian at that time. very strong Christian, believed in God, and I hung on to that through those 2 challenging years because I felt kind of very alone there. There were about 6 or 7 other Rotumans there.
Yeah.
And then after USP, I went back to QVS and taught for 4 years. Those 4 years were wonderful. I love being a teacher much more than being a student,
Yes.
right? And yeah, those 4 years were wonderful years at QVS. So I still have fond memories. I was the editor of the Victorian, the magazine. For the final year I was there. And then I went to USP in 1973. And so I did my BA and I majored in English and in history. And I also did a graduate certificate in education. There were a number of Rotumans there when I went to USP, and we had the Rotuman Club. We had so much fun, you know, doing our dances, learning the language, making koua, you know, the earthen oven. And I loved my time when I was at USP. Those were wonderful years. And then meeting all the students from different parts, you know, of the Pacific especially.
Yeah.
But when I left USP, the year I graduated, I was the only person who graduated from USP with a PhD. But my PhD came at so much, at such an emotional cost to me, because I really didn't have the support of my supervisor at the time. And I came to Hawaii, to the East West Center for the final year where I wrote my dissertation. I had no help whatsoever from my supervisor in Fiji in terms of giving me feedback and encouraging me. In fact, my head of department at the time seemed to want to do everything and anything to stop me from getting my PhD. Wow. So it was a lot of stress. It was a very traumatic experience for me because I felt that I was working against the grain, and that here is a supervisor. You know, he was an American who came there from Africa, who was head of the department, who gave me no support whatsoever. So in a way, it's a miracle that I finished my PhD and it was sent overseas for examination. And the 2 examiners came back after 3 months when I felt that I was like, if they said, this is no good, that would be the end of me and my supervisor would win. But fortunately, both the examiners' reports came back and both said, accept as is. No need for any changes, no need for an oral defense. And I felt that I won over my supervisor. And as soon as I got that, I left USP, got a job in Hawaii, and I left. But it came at it was very stressful, very emotional. So I have a very soft spot for any students who want to, you know, get further education, sometimes through scholarships if necessary, if their families cannot afford it. And I do whatever I can to support, you know, students who want to go as far as they can in education. So here in Hawaii, I'm teaching at the film school. It's called the Academy for Creative Media. And I'm teaching my students how to write screenplays, how to make movies, how to tell their stories. And you see, it all goes back to my father in Rotuma, right? From a very early age, firing my imagination with the so-called myths and legends, the oral tales of the island. And that's something so simple, isn't it? We all grew up with these stories. And to think that I can now make a good living based on what I learned orally from my father, what a great gift, right?
Beautiful gift.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you just reminding us, to remember those moments, you know, like maybe we take for granted, or maybe just kind of like, you know, just something that you just don't take seriously. But look at this, It's a 360-degree turn from going back to Rotuma of your upbringing, and now you here in Hawaii earning a living as a professor, teaching exactly what your dad has done.
Yeah. And one of the, apart from the film on the coconut tree that I mentioned to you, which I just completed, hasn't been released yet. It's called A New Way. New is N-I-U, A New Way, Coconut Trees, the Virus, which is the pandemic, and the Vision, which is, reclaiming the coconut tree, the new culture. I just finished that film, and I'm also working with 7 animators on a short film about the origin of the coconut tree, and that should be finished in July, because I want to tell the story about how the coconut tree was a gift from the spirit world via the eel, right, as something to sustain Sina, for the rest of her life. And so I want to I guess go back to storytelling, right? Except when I was growing up, it was orally, but now that I'm in the film school, I'm using the medium of cinema and video to continue to tell the stories, because I think a great story has the power to transform people, to change people. I mean, those, for example, Christians, the story of Jesus, right? The story of Buddha, the story of Mahatma Gandhi, the story of Martin Luther King. Those are stories that change people, right? And so I see storytelling through whatever medium, whether it's novels or poetry or films or short stories, whatever. That's an opportunity to influence people, to change people, to transform people. And so I see this as a very honorable and a very special and sacred, responsibility to tell our stories.
Yes, that is so wonderful, Vinaka, for empowering us, because many of us, even those who are listening in and those who will connect later on, and even for our, indigenous communities in Oceania, we have so many stories that I think the lesson that we take from our Talanoa today is for us to take these stories seriously and look at the lessons. Yeah, the lessons. Even one thing I like as well of what you said earlier, Professor Vili, is the proverb. Yeah, those proverbs that sustained you from when you were young until now.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, one lesson I've learned over the years is that being a Rotuman is a bonus. It's a big plus, because you have something very special that, at least where I am, nobody else has. Those 16 years on the island in which I learned the language, the customs, the traditions, those gave me a very, very firm foundation, so that when the hurricanes, the strong winds come, I know who I am, right? And I know where I come from. And that's a great source of strength. And if there's a message I have for people out there, kids, young people listening, is not to be afraid of what makes you different, what makes you special. And even for us as minority, professors in a big research university, to me is like being a Rotuman. I'm proud of that. I can hold my own. I'm not afraid of, who cares if you come from Harvard or Princeton? I came from Malhaha High School. Thank you very much. And I'm here with you. You started the race very early on. You were right in front, but I caught up with you, right? That's my attitude, So, don't look down on me. Don't look down on me, right? And so for me, it's wonderful for us who come from places like Fiji or Samoa or Tonga or Rotuma, who know our culture and our language. We've got gold. We've got gold, right? And it's something to uphold, to honor, to be proud of, and to weaponize it if necessary to further, our education, and always to be aware that we are standing on a very, very firm foundation. Yeah.
Yes, Vinaka, Vinaka. I really like what you said there. It doesn't matter you come from Harvard, I come from Mangaha.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that is I think, Professor Will, I'm going to make a t-shirt for you on that one. That's a nice one. Oh, that is
Okay.
beautiful. Yes, Vinaka, Vinaka vakalevu. I have a comment and a question from Marlon Isimeli. Is it okay
Mhm.
if I ask you?
Sure. Yes.
He's asking a question. Do you remember doing the play Kir Kir Sasa? Is that
Yes.
a play that you made? So
Yes.
I think he has a memory connected to his father.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Hi, Marlon. I'm sorry I cannot see you, but a pleasure to hear your question. Yeah, I remember your father very fondly. I think we did that play during Rotuma Day. It must have been like a May the 13th occasion when I was director of the Oceania Center for Arts and Culture in Fiji. I went back to Fiji for 2 years, 2010 to 2012. And that was when we did the oral tale of Sasa. It was a drama, and yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, doing it before the Rotumans and basically telling, a story about a woman who had her armpits tattooed. That's what Sasa means, all right? And how when she was terrorized by a giant who wanted to eat her maidservants, she said to the giant, okay, well, why don't you lay down over there and rest, but let me dance for you. Let me entertain you. And if at the end of it, you don't like it, you can eat my two girls, all right? And then she started to show off her armpits, and the giant was fascinated with all the tattoo marks, all right? And then later on, the giant said, can I have my armpits tattooed as well? And said, oh yeah, come over here, lay down over here. And then she tied the giant to the coconut tree. See, coconut trees are very useful. They keep reappearing, right? And the giant started to move, and she said, don't move or the tattoos would come out nicely. And she got her community to make the lovo, the earthen oven. And when the stones were red hot, they all lined up and rubbed the tattoo, the armpit of the giant, and killed the giant, right? So so that was how she managed to domesticate a terrorist, right? Through humor, through dance, and through the community. You need community support to be able to overcome your enemy, right? So you see, our tales are full of values and morals and lessons we can learn about life. So Kikirsasa is probably my favorite Rutuman oral tale, because it's about this woman who's able to domesticate and even kill a giant who was terrorizing, the area, and her two maid servants. So yeah, kudos to the women. See, our island, it was a woman who was the first inhabitant of the island, the so-called Honitemos. And so we have these women stories that show that our women are not at all soft. They know how to deal with the men when they become unruly and they start misbehaving.
Wow, that is amazing. Eh? All kudos to all our Rotuman women, and I know there's a lot of them listening in, and also any amazing woman who's listening in to today. That's a really good story to reflect on. Eh? Vinaka vakalevu. Another question that has come through here is, I think you've already mentioned about the inspiration of the land has eyes, so it is connected to your family and to your dad.
Yes, yes, that is true. But also, when I left the island, I had very mixed feelings. When I left, partly because of the poverty that my family suffered, and then I didn't go back for 13 years. 13 years, I was afraid to go back, and then when I went back to the island, I realized I had changed so much, and people had changed. Many people had died, and there was a younger kind of generation. But anyway, when I moved into cinema, into filmmaking, and I wanted to make my first feature film, I was advised by an Indian director to go back to my childhood and mine my childhood for a story that's inspired by what it was like growing up. And at first I didn't want to because I was afraid to go back to these unresolved feelings. For example, my father dying when I was 14. And when he died, I thought, this is it. That's my storyteller, right? That's my rock. And I said, how can I get out of the island now that he's dead, right? And so I ran away from home. And when I was discovered, my father was already buried because people had to be buried quickly, right? Because no refrigeration at the time, etc. And so I had lived for a long time with this feeling of guilt, because my brothers and sisters felt that I was very cruel running away from home. And then I wanted to kind of, I suppose, in a way, redeem myself. Because when I went to school, I majored in English when I went to university, because it was my father not understanding English that's got him into trouble. All right, in the court case, I'm referring to the scene in The Land Has Eyes. But anyway, that scene, and then a lot of unresolved things that happened to me in Rotuma inspired me to make The Land Has Eyes. But also growing up there, as I said earlier, that saying, Piatamaon maf, Piatamaon au. I mean, we lived in fear of that, of the spirit world, right? So I wanted to tell a story that illustrates how powerful Rotuman beliefs in the spirit world could be. And I think even today on the island, people still think about it and wonder if there's truth, if there's power, if there's efficacy in that saying. And even though people are Christians, I think it's possible to have both, right? Traditional beliefs as well as Christian beliefs, and they don't need to be necessarily out of sync with each other.
Yes, and Vinaka vakalevu. So that's the second question, and I think the third one, which may be the last question. If anyone else has any questions or comments for Professor Vilsoni, you can type it on the chat here, and we can be able to ask him. So one that has come through is asking about, I think in addition to your 2 films that you are going to be launching soon, what are other researches, or what is the future projects that you will be planning to do that would be something you can be able to inspire Rotumans and Fijians?
Yeah, well, you won't believe this, but I'm actually doing 2 other films about the coconut tree. One is a documentary, feature-length documentary, working with Hawaiians to tell the history of the coconut tree. And the working title is Clusters of Mana, the dangerous coconuts of Hawaii. So we wanted to look at the historical, give the historical overview of what happened to new culture in Hawaii, because at one time it was very central to Hawaiian way of life. And now there's the New Now movement trying to reclaim it and to bring it back, and how the tourism industry transformed the new. So that's a documentary. At one point we were thinking of making comparisons with Rotuma and the way it is in Rotuma compared to Hawaii, but I'm not sure whether we would actually make the trip to Rotuma or not. So that's the documentary. And I'm also doing one about with Philip Skorch. Do you know him? In Germany, who is a museum curator, and Noel Kahanu.
Oh, yes, yes,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
And looking at coconut-related objects or cultural treasures in museums around the world to do with the coconut tree. Like, whether it's drums, pahu drums, or whether it's baskets or fans or like Kiribati, for example, had the body armor made of sinnet.
The woven one, eh?
Yeah, the woven, yeah. And so, yeah, we're looking at the museums around the world and the holdings they have about the coconut tree. And we're planning a big exhibit at Cambridge University, the museum there, the anthropology museum at Cambridge. And there's going to be an exhibition and a screening of the films, right? And panel discussions and so on. But so I'm working with a group in Germany that is looking at indigeneities in the future, looking at how indigenous people today could draw from the past, right, and help them navigate, the journey ahead as we venture forth into the unknown future. And how, the past, including new culture, could help us, remain grounded, help us find our way into the unknown. And that's a big project that involves scholars from around the world that I'm involved in. And we're getting some of the funding from these films I'm telling you about from this large funding organization in Germany. So, for example, this morning we had a Zoom for 1.5 hours, right? One German scholar, Noel Kahanu, Hawaiian, and one Japanese scholar, and myself. So 4 of us, 1.5 hours, talked about nothing else but new culture.
Yeah. Ooh, we can't wait. We can't wait to see what's going to come out in terms of exhibitions and films, and I'm sure with books. And you're just reminding us, with the coconut as a tree of life, it has so much value from the root all the way to the tip of the fronds, everything in between has so much use. And you're just reminding us again, the value of these types of things that we were taught, but maybe some of us take things for granted. But now, look, you've got the whole world involved in talking and discussing and sharing, because this tree can have so much to give to this world, particularly during this pandemic. So much to offer. And I have one more question, if that's okay with you, Professor Vili. It's from George Linga. He's just asking a question in terms of the woven gods, which discuss the power of the ape, or the Rotuman white ceremonial mat. Was that a book that you wrote as well?
Yes, it's part of my my thesis, my dissertation, which was about the indigenous theater forms of Oceania. So it was called Polynesian Clowns and Satirical Comedies. So looking at indigenous theater forms, which later on became woven gods, women, I think women in power in Rotuma. Yeah, the Rotuman Ape is actually, when I was Zooming with animators, what we are going to do is we are going to animate on the ape as the background. So instead of tapa, we have the ape. So we're using animation to tell the origin myth that I was talking to you about. You see, all these things are connected. Yeah, it always fascinated me that when the bride and the groom in Rotuman weddings, traditional weddings, they were bound with these fine mats, and then they were lifted and carried. So I often wondered, why did they bind, the man and the couple in these fine mats? What's the reason? And then doing the research, when the warriors went to war, in some cases, they wore the ape around them. So I used to think, why would anyone wear an ape? How can you run, right, with an ape around you, But, it makes sense if you believe that the ape is imbued with the mana of the ancestors, with the spirit world, right? And so my research, my theory is that when the women of old, when they wove these very, very fine Rotuman mats called the ape, that was the time when the spirit world was very alive, right? And that when they were weaving the very fine mats, they were capturing the spirits, right? And transforming them, right, into benevolent spirits instead of ones wreaking havoc and destroying. And so the mats were imbued with the mana of the ancestors, with the dead. And this is why for us, the ape, we don't walk on it, we don't, it's a very different kind of mat. You only bring it out when there's an important ceremony like weddings or funerals, and you treat it with great, great respect, I think, because we believe that it's a sacred cultural treasure. It's a precious, we call it tepumue, which means it's a precious, cultural treasure. And so, yeah, that to me was very exciting, trying to understand why. And a couple, I believe, they're bounded by the fine mats to enhance their fertility, right? But also to be protected by the mana of the ancestors and the people who wove the mats symbolically. And so it's wonderful to think that our own people had these traditions that reinforced a sense of community, that try to kind of connect the natural world with the supernatural, right? Humans with trees and plants. And I think our people always try to have an integrated, holistic worldview. And then, with westernization, modernization, colonialism, these things, broke apart. And now you have something like the New Now movement trying to put things back together. Again, when about a week ago, I was at UH West Oahu, and we were planting these coconut trees, seedlings, and new. A Hawaiian composer, chanter, composed a new chant in honor of ulu, the breadfruit, and the coconut tree. And so you had about 30 to 40 people standing in a circle. We'd learned the chant in Hawaiian. We were chanting as the tree was being planted by someone important from the community, like the chancellor at UH West Oahu planted a tree. And while she was planting it, everyone was chanting, like singing to the plant, the tree, to encourage it to grow, and asking the spirit world to add its own power to the growth of this tree, because it's very dry out there. Anyway, this relationship between humans and trees, and reclaiming that through chanting, I mean, that was a chicken skin moment for me. I'd never seen anything like that before. And that's what's happening now, right? People are trying to put this broken world back together again and reconnect us all, right? Into an integrated, holistic worldview.
Wow. Yes, Vinaka vakalevu for sharing that. And one of my Fijian colleagues just typed on the comment section of one of our Fijian proverbs about the new, because I know there's quite a few vakaviti or idioms, which is the Vinaka vakaniu. So, when we say the word Vinaka vakaniu, it means that it's holistically good. Everything is wonderful and perfect in whatever way it is. So it's just so wonderful to talk with you today, Professor Vilsoni. And I know that you've had a very long morning with your meeting with your other projects. And today, I think on behalf of all of us who are logging in from around the world, and even some from Fiji, who are connecting to us today, they all just saying Vinaka, Vinaka, Vinaka vakalevu. And many of them are, this is how I'm gonna list it, are students from QVS, so they remembered you. And there's a few here who are your students from USP. Williame Wangalevi, Vinaka Kai. I'm gonna just read out his comment if that's okay with you, Professor. He said, I am being transported back to my LL class, lectures at USP, discussion on imagery. Right. He is truly one of the Pacific's greatest. So there you go. I just, maybe at this time, I should end our Talanoa on that high note of acknowledging William's beautiful expressions. And there's also another of your student, Master Le, connecting in from Japan. And also Mr. Vunindilo this morning was just telling me that it looks like Mr. Vilsoni Hereniko was my teacher at USP when I came as a foundation student. Yeah. That's right. So he was describing you,
My
really.
big hair. I had too much hair, but
He
you
was
know,
saying this.
now I've lost most of it. But there was a time when I made the most of the hair I had.
Vinaka, he was saying, I remember him with a big afro.
Yeah.
And he comes with a mustache and
Yes,
also
yes.
glasses. At the U8 lecture.
Yes.
So, yeah, so I just want to say Vinaka vakalevu to you, Professor
Yeah.
Vilsoni, for spending this time with us. I know we promised you an hour, and looks like we are on Fijian time, and we are on time. Yeah,
Okay.
Vinaka
Very
vakalevu.
good.
And
Okay.
I think just before we end, is there anything else you just want to say or acknowledge anyone you're thinking of that you would like to share something to them? This is your time.
Oh, well, I just want to thank everyone listening in, especially Rotumans from all over the world. I wish I could see your faces. I cannot because it's just me and Tarisi. But for all of you out there, please know that I send you my best wishes, my hanisi to all of you. We are all one family. We truly are, and with the Fijians and the Indians and all the people of Fiji. I think you know, those of us who come from Fiji, we are all proud to be from Fiji, and of course, Rotuma is part of Fiji. So may I wish you all the very best for yourselves and for your families and for our futures. Today we have the pandemic that is still raging. I haven't been back to Fiji for more than a year now. I used to go back twice a year, so I've got itchy feet. I can't wait to get back. But I hope that maybe one day, if we're all lucky, we'll get to see each other again face to face. And thank you, Dr. Tarisi, for this opportunity to Talanoa and to share a few words. Thank you.
Vinaka vakalevu Faxia, to you, Professor Vilsoni Hereniko, and we would like to also acknowledge your family, and to Jeanette and the family. Thank you so much for doing such an amazing work over there in Honolulu at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And we're watching here from here in Hilo and also around the world, and wishing you all the very best with all the launching of the films that you're working on, the exhibition, and the project that you're going to be doing at the Cambridge University, the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology in the United Kingdom. Vinaka vakalevu.
Vinaka. Madibanda.
Madibanda, Vinaka vakalevu Willi. Vinaka vakalevu to everybody for logging in today. Isn't that wonderful? That was beautiful to acknowledge Professor Vilsoni Hereniko for taking his time out from his Sunday afternoon to Talanoa with all of us today. Vinaka vakalevu Ravai, Marietta Ringamoto, Vinaka vakalevu Betty Walker, Vinaka vakalevu Sarna Sema Tikumai. Iya, Rocky Ralifo, Williame Wangalaivi Mastale, Vinaka vakalevu Sarna Sema Tikumai, Teresa Sosefo, Vinaka vakalevu, you most welcome. Iya, we're just so happy to connect with everybody and start a new week leading up to the Rotuma Day next week. Okay, so we just want to acknowledge everybody. Pipsi Albert, Vinaka vakalevu na Sema Tikumai. George Linga, Vinaka vakalevu na Sema Mai, Makarita Recito, Isa, Tevita Kitione, Vinaka vakalevu Sara, Richeli Flexman, Totoka. Vinaka vakalevu. I'm so glad that you all spent some time with us. Katarina Atalifo, Vinaka vakalevu Sara Faexia, Mata Howard, Vinaka vakalevu Sara. Isa. Vinaka vakalevu Sara, Chwani Batiwali, Vinaka vakalevu na Sema Tikma USP. Thank you so much, everyone. Kawata Rokongata, connecting in from Brisbane. Vinaka vakalevu sara na sea matikumai. Auri Williame, Vinaka vakalevu sara. We really appreciate everybody. Emosi mule. Vinaka vakalevu emosi. I was able to share the vosa vakaviti you typed up. Vinaka for that. Vinaka vakaniu. Yeah, Vinaka vakaniu is such a beautiful Fijian proverb that highlights to us the beauty or the perfection of something. As we all know, na niu e kauyang. Yeah, there's more than 100 uses, or even more than that. There's so much uses for traditional medicine, for weaving, for furniture, for food, ropes, armor, water, everything that you would ever need, I think, back in the islands. When they were small, as they were growing up, and even in our generation and our parents' generation. So what a wonderful way to hear the story from Professor Vilsoni Hereniko, who is one of the leading academics here at the University of Hawaii, here in the United States of America, and reconnecting back to his childhood in Rotuma and acknowledging his father with the power of storytelling. And it's so beautiful. I think for all of us, whatever memories you have of your mom, or beautiful memories of your dad or your grandfather, whoever raised you, it's something that you should not erase. Yeah, hold it with you and take it with you. As remember what Mr. Professor Vilsoni Hereniko said, we should weaponize it. And that is a very, very powerful statement. Something that we should not throw away, something that we should not look down upon, something that we should be shy about. We should be proud of it. We should be proud of it. If you are Fijian or Rotuman or Samoan or Tongan, it is a plus. Remember, he said, it is a bonus to be a Rotuman. Wow, that is amazing. Yeah, Vinaka vakalevu sara. And I hope that you really enjoyed the Talanoa session. And we will see you again on Wednesday when I will be hosting Letila Mitchell, our Rotuman sister from Australia, who will be logging in on Wednesday. And on Thursday, we have Hapfeld Hoda from Fiji. They will be gracing our Talanoa session as well on Wednesday and Thursday. So something to look forward to. Vinaka vakalevu sara Rotuma, Fayaxia, Vinaka vakalevu, au sa waka mo dito kay ni Hawaii, mahalo nui ni mo demanda.